let's unpack the mystery behind one of the most polarizing and, frankly, fascinating figures of the social media age, Dan Bilzerian. For years, he's been the ultimate internet playboy, just projecting this life of absolute, unbridled excess. But today, we are going to peel back the layers of this carefully constructed onion. We're going to separate the flashy facade from the actual finances. $100 million. That's the massive estimated net worth that grabbed the world's attention, right? It's the number that seemingly justifies the private jets, the wild parties, and that unbelievable lifestyle we see all over our feeds. But the reality of exactly where this mountain of cash came from, and honestly, who actually controls it, is just fascinatingly complex. And something he said once perfectly reveals the central irony of his entire story. When critics accused him of just being a rich kid living off his dad's money, Bilzerian didn't even fight it. He actually weaponized the perception of being a wealthy, careless trust fund kid to get access to high-stakes private poker games. But as we're going to see in a minute, that rumor he actively leaned into, well, it was actually incredibly close to the truth. So to find the truth, we're going to peel this back layer by layer. We'll quickly cover the king of Instagram, the poker savant illusion, the family trust fund, the Ignite empire crash, his crypto and liquidated assets, and finally, the actual man behind the myth. All right, Section 1, the king of Instagram, and how he monetized the ultimate Playboy image. So, Bilzerian deliberately engineered what he calls a wish fulfillment lifestyle. He essentially took everything a certain demographic of young men might aspire to and just dialed it up to 1,000. We're talking a 1987 Gulfstream jet cheekily registered to GOAT Airways, a massive $1.5 million Mercedes 6x6. He even built an $8.5 million adult playground in Vegas, complete with its own paintball field. By doing all this, he totally monetized the attention of his male-dominated audience, leveraging his way into Hollywood cameos and massive brand endorsements. He literally built an empire on perception. But when we look at the financial data, differing estimates show just how hard it is to pin down his actual liquid wealth. Celebrity net worth puts him at $200 million, citing poker and a trust fund. Wealthy gorilla? They say $100 million from venture capital, but they also note ongoing investigations. And then you have the corporate SEC filings from his company Ignite, which are, frankly, incredibly opaque. The sheer variance across these sources tells us that untangling his personal wealth from his corporate branding is almost impossibly difficult. Moving on to Section 2, the poker savant illusion, fact or fiction. $36,626. This shockingly low figure actually represents his total official recorded tournament poker winnings on the traditional circuit, specifically a 180th place finish at the 2009 World Series of Poker. And that is literally it for his official record. Now, he contrasts that exceptionally low official number with massive, completely unverifiable claims of making tens of millions in private, invite-only games. I mean, he famously claimed to have won $10.8 million in a single heads-up game, and up to $50 million in the year 2014 alone. The catch here? Because these games are entirely private, played behind closed doors among billionaires and Hollywood elites, there's absolutely no official ledger to prove it. But you gotta admit, his strategy was undeniably clever. As he's admitted himself, it was pure psychological warfare. He explicitly wanted to look like a loose cannon with way too much money and zero discipline. By acting totally reckless, he lured incredibly wealthy amateur players into high-stakes games. He even purposefully brought models to these games just to distract his opponents. He basically played the part of the reckless whale to take money from actual reckless whales. Section 3, the Family Trust Fund, or as we could call it, Sins of the Father. His family's history perfectly charts a staggering generational pattern of legal and financial chaos. Back in the 80s, his father, Paul Bilzerian, was a massive Wall Street corporate raider living in a 28,000 square foot Florida mansion. But by 1988, Paul was indicted for fraud. Then, in 2001, Paul declared bankruptcy, claiming he only had $15,000 in assets against a jaw-dropping $180 million in liabilities owed to the government. Fast forward to 2024, and the SEC is filing fraud charges against Dan and Paul's company, Ignite. We're looking at a multi-decade saga of massive wealth and staggering federal investigations. Here's the really crucial point. Before Paul's total financial collapse and bankruptcy, he reportedly established a series of opaque offshore trust funds for his sons, Dan and Adam.
Now, while the exact amounts are hidden, it's widely believed by financial analysts and critics that these trusts were the true seed capital for Dan's entire empire. It wasn't just poker winnings that built the lifestyle, right? The lifestyle was highly likely bankrolled by inherited money, shielded from federal seizure.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Ignite Empire Crash, Corporate Funds versus Personal Lifestyle. The ultimate facade really comes down to this. On Instagram, Bilzerian showcased this massive Bel Air mansion, framing it as the ultimate proof of his immense personal success. But the financial reality? He didn't even own it. The mansion was being rented for $200,000 a month, and that rent was being paid by his company, Ignite, under the guise of marketing expenses. This kind of wild spending contributed to a staggering $50 million corporate loss for Ignite in 2019 alone. The corporate structure was basically bleeding cash to subsidize his viral internet persona. And the fallout of this strategy was spectacular. Not only did the SEC step in with fraud charges, alleging the company faked sales to inflate revenue, but in December 2024, Dan actually filed a lawsuit against his own father. Dan alleged that Paul orchestrated a boardroom takeover and essentially stole the vape company right out from under him. The empire built on family money was literally tearing the family apart in court. Let's look at Section 5, Crypto and Liquidated Assets, the safety net. So with things collapsing, his wealth preservation strategy has become, well, incredibly scattered. He was actually a very early adopter of Bitcoin, getting in around 2017, which significantly bolstered his net worth during the big crypto bull runs. He still pulls in money as a brand ambassador for GG Poker, but then it gets kind of weird. He's opening a stem cell clinic in Antigua, and he's even developing something called PheroBoost, a pheromone-infused grooming product meant to scientifically attract women. It's just a totally chaotic mix of cutting-edge tech and sheer vanity projects.
But the cracks in the foundation are definitely showing. His prized possession, that 40,000 square foot Vegas mansion with the paintball field, was quietly listed for $25 million in late 2024. After it just sat there unsold, he slashed the price by over $5 million a few months later. Financial reporters strongly suspect he is currently engaged in a massive fire sale of his U.S. assets, likely preparing to relocate abroad, potentially joining his father in the Caribbean amidst all this mounting legal pressure.
Finally, Section 6, the man behind the myth, anxiety and eccentricities.
The truth you find in his interviews is actually surprisingly relatable and highly eccentric, because behind that explosive, hypermasculine bravado is a guy who openly admits he suffers from heavy anxiety due to the constant public scrutiny. He relies really heavily on CBD to unwind and sleep. In fact, he's so pro-CBD, he even administered it to his cat, Muffin, under its tongue after a surgery. He absolutely despises authority and rigid rules, famously telling an exclusive London club exactly where to go when they demanded he wear a suit jacket. And he's terrified of getting old, spending upwards of $40,000 a pop on experimental stem cell injections to try and halt the aging process.
And get this, when a journalist from Square Mile magazine asked him what he wanted to be reincarnated as, probably expecting him to say a tiger or a lion or something, Bilzerian gave this incredibly surreal, honestly hilarious answer. He chose a dolphin so he could swim and communicate telepathically. I mean, it completely shatters the aggressive, hypermasculine mold he spent a decade carefully constructing for the internet. Which brings us to the ultimate question as we wrap up this explainer. Did Dan Bilzerian play the internet, masterfully using a manufactured image and his father's controversial wealth to build a $100 million global brand? Or did the internet play him, trapping him in a lifestyle so expensive to maintain that it led to corporate collapse, SEC investigations, and literally suing his own family just to keep the facade alive? That is the big takeaway here. The cost of living a wish fulfillment fantasy in the real world is incredibly, sometimes impossibly high. Thanks for diving into this one with me, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.